Father Robert Lauder, a priest of the Diocese of Brooklyn, professor of philosophy at St. John's University. Welcome to another episode of The Catholic Novel. Today we're doing a terrific novel, The Shoes of the Fisherman by Morris West. Morris West has a number of novels located in Rome. He lived many years in Rome, and he seems to know he seems to know even a little bit of the Vatican politics. Now, a couple of times on these shows, I have compared or contrasted the novel with some film version of the novel. And I don't know whether you've heard this as much as I have, but most times I hear people say, well, I read the novel and then I saw the film and I was disappointed. So most times I think people have, at least in my experience, have found the novel better than the film. I'm thinking of a couple of films that are at least as good. I think Tale of Two Cities with Ronald Colman is as good as Dickens' novel. And I think Shane is quite a bit better than the actual novel. This particular novel, I thought of two others. Green Years by A.J. Cronin, Keys of the Kingdom by A.J. Cronin. I think both films are quite as good as the novels. Now, this particular novel, I think, is considerably better than the movie version that was made of it. In the movie version, the Pope was played by Anthony Quinn, and the priest, who is kind of under suspicion because of some of his doctrines, was played by Oscar Werner, two terrific actors. But here's the mistake I think they made. Remember, the definition or description I've been using of a Catholic novel is this. A Catholic novel is a story whose theme is based on some Catholic dogma or some Catholic moral teaching or some Catholic sacramental or liturgical principle, and the mystery of Catholicism is treated favorably. So in a Catholic novel, it doesn't mean every priest and every nun has to be a saint, but the mystery of Catholicism has to be treated favorably. Now, the mistake the filmmakers made, and I guess I understand it, they spent an enormous amount of footage at the beginning of the film showing the cardinals processing into the conclave to vote for the Pope. And I'm sure they wanted to make that very dramatic and they thought it would work, but cinematically it doesn't work at all. It really gets the movie off to a kind of a dull start. I remember I went to a special screening of it. It's a rather long film, so at intermission, the priest sitting next to me as a joke turned to me and said, "When does the movie begin?" I mean, that's how deadly that scene was. But there's nothing deadly about the novel. It is quite good. Let me read the plot to you. On the back of the cover of the edition I have, it's quite a good summary. The Pope has died, and the corridors of the Vatican hum with intrigue as cardinals from all over the world gather to choose his successor. Suddenly, the election is concluded with a surprise result. The new Pope is the youngest cardinal of all, and a Russian. Shoes of the Fisherman slowly unravels the heartwarming and profound story of Kirill Lakota, a cardinal who reluctantly steps out from behind the Iron Curtain to lead the Catholic Church and to grapple with the many issues facing the contemporary world. That's a very good summary, I think, of the novel. In rereading these novels and preparing these lectures, I have kind of reevaluated certain authors. I think Morris West is a terrific storyteller. He's able to draw a number of subplots together, and he's also able to draw a number of characters and fit them into the proper place in the novel. Now, one of the important parts of the novel is the relationship between the Pope and this priest who has a theory of evolution. Morris West has admitted in interviews that the priest character was modeled on Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And if you know anything about Catholic theology or Catholic thought in the 20th century, no one had to tell you that. It's a very close sketch of fictional sketch of Pierre Teilhard. Now, in the 40s, several years before the council, Pierre Teilhard had a kind of a shadow over him. His doctrine was questionable. As I recall, there didn't seem to be any room for original sin in his vision. I'll try to explain his vision in a minute. And also, Henri de Lubac, the Jesuit theologian, was also under suspicion because it didn't seem like he sufficiently made the supernatural a gift from God. And John Courtney Murray was under suspicion. Now, it's amazing. All three of those thinkers, de Lubac and Murray especially, had a tremendous influence on the council. And Pierre Teilhard, while he may not have had a tremendous influence on the council, unable to publish anything, forbidden to publish anything before his death. After he died, all sorts of material appeared. I think his doctrine is absolutely beautiful. I think any problems with it that scholars have settled, I think it's been worked out. I think he's quite orthodox. What does he do? He takes a view of evolution as a kind of a story, and all of evolution is moving toward the risen Christ. So Teilhard talks about what he calls cosmogenesis, biogenesis, nuogenesis, and Christogenesis. And each one is a movement to a new level of reality in terms of evolution. So by cosmogenesis, he means evolution is stretching toward life. By biogenesis, he means evolution is stretching toward consciousness. By nuogenesis, he means that evolution is stretching toward human consciousness. And by Christogenesis, he means the arrival of Christ, and everything is changed and elevated and sanctified because of Christ. I think it's really beautiful. So you can look at evolution as a kind of a story leading up to Christ, and all of us have a part in that story. Teilhard also talks about, how can I put this, the atmosphere surrounding the earth. So he talks about the lithosphere, and by that he means the stone, is that the right word? The material crust around the earth. Then he talks about the hydrosphere, and he means the period where the water covered the earth. Then he talks about the noosphere. Now what is that? It's kind of the intellectual atmosphere. It's the ideas and theories and knowledge that has arrived. And then finally the Christosphere, which is the at least partial coming of the kingdom of God. Now, I think I announced on other shows why I have agreed to do this series. A friend of mine suggested I do it, and I said to her, I don't know, will people be interested? Do you think we should try it? And then when I spoke to my producer, Mike Gagan, he was all for it. And thank heaven we've been getting some nice feedback. But one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because of Teilhard's view of the Christosphere. I have come to believe that if you read Catholic novels regularly, your vision of life changes. I don't mean that you were a non-believer and you become a believer. I mean, what we hold as Catholics as true and important becomes more real to you. And that's partly because of the power of story. That the great Catholic novels, all Catholic novels have God present, all of them. Otherwise, it's not a Catholic novel, okay? But at least in a handful of them, God is the main character. And to read a dramatic story in which God is the main character, it's like reading what many people refer to as spiritual books, okay? I remember many years ago, a Catholic nun told me while she read spiritual books, she thought she got more out of Catholic novels. And I can understand that because they're so dramatic, they're so well written, and so on. So without specifically zeroing in on it, I think I was eager to do this series because I think the potential is terrific. Now the ideal, of course, is if you find one of these lectures interesting, you then go and read the novel. If that happens, then the series is a tremendous success, okay? Now, the portrait that Morris West gives of the Pope from Russia, I think is quite good, and he uses a technique here that we've come across before. He has the Pope writing something like a diary. And of course, the classic example of a Catholic novel that does that is Diary of a Country Priest. But Graham Greene does it in The End of the Affair. He has Sarah's diary, and Greene is such a skilled writer, you'd swear the diary was written by a female, okay? Now, why is this such a good technique? Because we enter into the mind of the main character. And I can't even imagine what a morning briefing is like for the Pope. I mean, here is a man who has some kind of responsibility toward the spiritual lives of millions and millions and millions of people. I mean, what could a briefing be like? The briefing would take a couple of years, okay? So the decisions the Pope has to make, they're natural for drama. It's just a natural, okay? So I want to read one of the selections from his diary. He's planning to write a letter, and he's writing in his diary that he's planning to write a letter. And he's wondering, what should he say in it, and whom should he write it to, whom should he address it to? So I think this captures something of the responsibility. It also captures something of the honesty and basic goodness and basic holiness of the character that Morris West has sketched. So this is his writing about what he's going to do. I'm reminded of something forgotten too often by us, the shepherds, Tertullian's testimony of the soul. Now he's quoting Tertullian. Man is one name belonging to every nation upon earth. In them all is one soul through many tongues. Every country has its own language, yet the subjects of which the untutored soul speaks are the same everywhere. And then he goes on. To whom shall I write this letter? To the whole church, to my brother bishops, to all priests and monks and nuns, to all the faithful, without whom our office is meaningless. I must show them how their mission is not merely to teach, but to educate one another with love and forbearance, each lending of his own strength to the weak, of his own knowledge to the ignorant, of his charity to all. And when I have written, what then? I must begin to act through the administration of the church, to see that reforms are made where they are needed, and that the inertia of a large and scattered organization does not stand in the way of God's intention. I must have patience, too, and tolerance, understanding that I have no right to demand of God a visible success in all I attempt. I am the gardener. I plant the seed and water it, knowing that death may take me before I see the bud of the flower. It is late, and I must begin. Kirill, the servant of the servants of God, to the bishops and brethren of all the churches, peace and apostolic benediction. Well, I think that is just absolutely wonderful writing, and I tell you, it almost moved me to tears. The responsibility, the burden of being a pope, somehow Morris West has caught it, and yet instilled this man with the sufficient faith, hope, and love that he's ready to take chances. So I know every novel I have picked for this series, I strongly recommend. So I'm not recommending the movie Shoes of the Fisherman, and my memory of it is not a good movie, which is sad, because it could have been. The drama is there. But I am strongly recommending the novel The Shoes of the Fisherman. I can't imagine anyone not finding it interesting, and I think you may even find it inspiring.